Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast. We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. To further this cause, we give away a product every week that will empower you to get involved in changing your life and changing our world. You can register for our weekly giveaway by subscribing at truthandliberty.net. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to receive weekly updates on guests, news, and much more. This is an interactive live cast, and we welcome your questions. To ask a question during the live cast, use the comment or chat features. Now get ready to dive into this week's topics with our hosts on location in Colorado, USA.
Hello, this is Andrew Wommack. I'm here with Richard Harris. He's the Chief Counsel for Truth and Liberty, and this is our Monday night live cast. And tonight we have as our guest Kristin Hawkins. I met her back, I think, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago when we had what we call the event here, and she spoke for her organization. And I tell you, it lit a fire on Jamie and me, my wife. We both loved it. And since then, we've had her on our television program. We've had her on our Truth and Liberty broadcast, and she's a blessing. So we'll be giving her a better introduction in a few minutes. But we want you to get involved in what we're doing. And so we will spend around 25 minutes, 30 minutes probably maximum, interviewing Kristin, talking about things that are going on. But then we want you to get involved, and you can send us questions. We also have people on our phones that are ready to pray with you and answer questions, give you any of our materials and stuff. So I'm going to let Richard, he's our Chief Counsel here at Truth and Liberty, and I'm going to let him give you all of the details about how you can get involved.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. One of the most exciting things about what we're doing here at Truth and Liberty is we're equipping people to make a difference. And if you're not aware of it, you need to know that on our website, we have a resources page, a resources tab actually, that has several tabs underneath it, where you can find all kinds of incredible information. We have a 24/7 news feed. We've got a whole section devoted to voting resources, getting registered to vote, voters' guides, and finding your representative and all these other things. And then there's all kinds of research available too. So we hope you'll check that out. And tonight, if you're watching and you're on Facebook, we encourage you to switch over and watch on truthandliberty.net so that your experience doesn't get censored. I believe they censored our promo earlier today, Andrew. So,
well, we've been censored a number of times, and so if you want to make sure you don't miss any of this interview, we're going to be talking about abortion primarily, and they are very sensitive about that. And
that's right.
You go to our website, you won't lose us.
Yeah, so there's lots of great resources on there, and we've also got lots of great things coming up here at Andrew Wommack Ministries, many awesome events, including next week is the Men's Advance, and this is going to be a fantastic time. Andrew's going to be ministering along with James J.B. Brown and Tony Dungy and others, and it's going to be a powerful time. So men, check it out on our website, register and turn out for that. You will be blessed. God With Us, our presentation of one of the Murin's dramatic productions, is going to take place on April 3rd through the 5th. Man, I love those shows. They're so powerful. Awesome. You'll be touched and encouraged. You can check that out as well on our website. And then Campus Days for Charis Bible College is April 15th through the 17th. And Andrew's going to be ministering along with Carrie Pickett, Wendell Parr, Barry Bennett, one of the best Bible teachers around. And it's going to be awesome. If you are wondering, what am I doing with my life? What's God's plan for me? Does God have something more for me? I can tell you this from personal experience, there is nowhere better to find the answers to that question than Charis Bible College. So we invite you to come out to Campus Days and let God change your life. And another thing that we've got coming up is the Don't Limit God Conference on May 1st, 2020 with Andrew and Jesse Duplantis. Man, Jesse's awesome.
Jesse's one of the biggest visionaries I've ever met. There's very few people I get around that inspire me to believe bigger. But I get to thinking like, God, I'm not doing anything when I get around Jesse. That guy's a big thinker.
He is awesome. And man, he's just great. You'll love it. Come out for that. Check it out on our website. That's again May 1st.
And you were sharing with me
yes,
that you listened to that teaching on Don't Limit God times 10 over and over and over. And that was a big part of getting you here.
It was a big part of it. I remember the stories that you told in it. I remember the whole thing about, vision or imagination and everything. It affected my life. It's a powerful teaching.
This is something that most people do not practice.
Yes.
We live in a negative world. People are small thinkers. And most Christians are limiting God through the way they think. So this will be a good conference.
Comes out of your experience where the Lord spoke to you and said, "You're limiting me," and you're like, "How am I limiting you, Lord?" And He began to reveal these principles that it'll touch your life. I promise it'll change the way you think. And the last thing I wanted to mention is for folks this is for anybody who wants to come, but we're holding a conference June 5th to the 6th called the Truth and Liberty Coalition Conference here in Colorado at Charis Bible College. And we're going to be equipping Christians and pastors and church leaders to actually step into the public square and make a difference. This isn't going to just be to rally you up or fire you up or get you mad. It's going to be to give you something you can use to make a difference. So that'll be coming out on our website soon, and you'll be able to check that out.
We had a meeting about that today, and I mean, we've got some very practical things that I believe is going to turn Colorado back to a red state, and it could work any place that you are. So that'll be a good thing to come to.
And if you're not one of our subscribers, we encourage you to subscribe. Go to the subscribe button on our website there, and you'll be eligible to receive our weekly giveaway. Every week we give one of Andrew's products away, and last week we gave Effortless Change. And Peggy Connolly, congratulations, you won that book, and you'll be getting that shortly. And this week the giveaway is Lessons from David, How to Be a Giant Killer. This is another one of my favorites. They're all my favorites, but this one is really good. So hopefully you'll subscribe and make yourself eligible to receive that today. We want to hear from you tonight. If you want to ask a question of Andrew or Kristin, go on the chat feature there and put your question in, or if you're still watching by Facebook, you can put it in the comment section there, and we'll try to get to your questions tonight. And we want you guys to know we're supported by our viewers. We're a donor-supported ministry at Truth and Liberty. We're a 501c4 organization. We depend on your generosity, and we appreciate it greatly. So you can go to our donate button there, and you can actually sign up to be a member of the coalition by being a recurring giver. Sign up for a regular monthly contribution of at least $5 per month, and you'll become a coalition member, and we'll send you a free gift. So we hope that you'll do that. And last, if you need prayer tonight,
That's your third last.
Is it?
Yes.
Well,
you're a preacher.
Sorry.
You're not only a lawyer.
Well, this is really the last.
In closing.
This time I'm not lying.
All right.
If you need prayer tonight, you can call 719-635-1111. We got trained prayer ministers standing by to help you.
Okay, so we want to get into our interview with Kristin, and she's got quite a biography here. I'm not going to go through all of it, but it was a number of years ago that she started Students for Life. She's the president and founder of that, and I think, if I'm not incorrect, that they have over 1,200 chapters around the United States. We have one right here in Charis Bible College, and Kristin was just giving us a report that some of the students right here were able to save the life of a child just, I think, back in January is when it was reported. So anyway, she's doing a great job, and they are hitting these college campuses, helping counter all of the liberal stuff that's being done. So welcome, Kristin. Glad to have you back with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on this evening.
So where are you right now? You're at home? Where is home?
I'm at home. I am in Pittsburgh, PA, so it's going to keep me really busy. I apologize if you hear children in the background. They were just having a Nerf battle fight, so I told them they had to stop, but we'll see.
Well, this will show that you are a real person.
Yes.
Amen. So,
that is true.
Real quickly, for those that haven't heard you, just give us a little brief explanation about Students for Life, what you do, and what kind of impact you're making.
Sure. Well, Students for Life is the nation's largest pro-life youth organization. We have the honor of starting pro-life campus groups in high schools, colleges, med and law schools, even homeschool groups and middle schools. We serve over 1,250 groups all across the United States of America. And it's so amazing. Our team is spread out everywhere. So every single day, they're on campuses having conversations about abortion with those most directly targeted by Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry, changing hearts, changing minds, and serving women who are in crisis.
We are actually having your Colorado representative in Charis Bible College tomorrow morning. Mm-hmm. So, man, I know that you're out there working. It's making a difference.
That's right. And that's exactly what we want to do, is get into as many schools as possible. I'm so excited about the chapter there at Harris because, getting into Bible schools is such an important objective for us because these are the leaders of the church. If anyone needs to speak about abortion, needs to know how to minister and witness to women who've maybe been part of abortion decision, it's those who are going to be leading the church. And often sometimes we hear from folks of, I don't know if we should talk about that at our Bible school. It's kind of a hard topic. But so I want to thank you, Andrew, for the leadership there at the school and being willing to prepare your students to talk about this issue.
And Kristin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember, you've given your testimony before and you were pro-life, but you weren't actively involved. You thought it was a non-issue, and God really rang your bell and got you starting this organization. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. I was, I kind of knew abortion was wrong, but then I think if you have asked me about, well, what if your friend gets pregnant and can't graduate high school, I would kind of been okay with some exceptions, I guess. But there was a woman in my church who was actually a part-time accountant for a crisis pregnancy center. And she asked me just one summer to be her intern. And I said, sure, I'm pro-woman. Why wouldn't I want to support a women's center? And I went into that pregnancy center and had no idea what we were going to be doing is counseling women every single day not to choose abortion and provide them with real options. And it was an eye-opening first couple of weeks for sure. Because this wasn't something we ever talked about at my church or at my school. And I didn't realize this is happening 2,700 times a day in America, but no one's really talking about it.
Well, I had you on back during the month of January in recognition of the Roe versus Wade, and we had you and Melissa Oden on. And one of the things that really blessed me, what you two were sharing, was that you've been at this a long time, and it was either you or Melissa saying that you thought maybe in your children's lifetime they might see an end to Roe versus Wade, but things are moving so fast, you're believing it's going to happen quickly.
Yeah, I actually do believe this pro-life generation will be the first post-Roe generation.
Hallelujah.
That we will be the ones. That we will be the ones that will see Roe be reversed or see a situation happen where the Supreme Court essentially will refuse to hear cases. And so will allow states to finally make their own decisions about abortion law, which 65% of millennials are actually in support of.
So why are you that optimistic? What's happening that's caused you to feel that way?
Well, I think you can see the momentum really has been growing. Unfortunately, not there in Colorado. It's been going the opposite direction. But in most states across the country, you have pro-life laws, regulations being passed on abortion facilities. There's been more than 500 pro-life laws passed just in the last decade, and it's all been at the states. You have polling that shows that this generation is actually more pro-life than actually our parents' generation. When it comes to second trimester or third trimester abortions or taxpayer funding of abortions, the vast majority, over 80% of Americans, are actually with us. They agree with us. So we know we have the momentum. We can look very tangentially just on the college campuses where we have 1,250 chapters, where Planned Parenthood is about 400. When we have events, we have standing room only students turning out. So you can see this momentum anywhere. And honestly, I think the best place for you to really see it is just in Washington, D.C. in January every year for the March for Life.
Mm-hmm. And President Trump is the first sitting president that ever honored the March for Life by speaking there. That was momentous.
That's a huge moment you think about in the pro-life movement, because for so long, especially for those of us who fought in the pro-life movement, we would go to the polls, we might door knock or phone bank for a candidate, and they would make all these pro-life promises. But then when they would get to office, they would kind of forget about pro-lifers, right? We would be told, now's not a good time. I have to wait till after my re-election in 2 years before I'll have any ability to do any of this. And so we've always were kind of treated as kind of like that stepchild of just, you're the second thought. And it was really frustrating to a lot of pro-lifers and to a lot of people saying, why should I vote? What makes a difference? And when I vote for these people who say they're pro-life, but then they fail to do anything. Mm-hmm. Well, President Trump changed all that.
He's probably the most pro-life
candidate, and he's upheld it. Absolutely.
He is probably the most pro-life president that I have ever seen in my lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
He absolutely is. If you look at the actual record of what he and his administration have done, the judges they've appointed, the regulations their cabinet members have imposed, no administration has done more than President Trump's administration in protecting life.
I was just talking with a woman about Trump, and she agreed with all of the things that he's doing, but she is so turned off by his rhetoric, his tweets, and she's got some members of her family that are both Hispanic and blacks, and they're married into her family, and they have a hatred for Trump, and so she is very apologetic. And I was basically telling her, I said, I don't agree with everything he says, but if you look at his policies and not the person, I don't think you could get anybody who is more conservative and doing more for the Christian community than Trump.
You know, and Andrew, this is a question I hear from students a lot. They say, I don't like the president's Twitter messages. I don't like what he said here. And really the question is, you need to look at what are the actual policies? What are the deeds that have been done by this administration over the rhetoric, over the words? And I also think about, you know, when I'm going to the polls, I know I'm not electing a pastor. I know I'm not electing a religious leader. I'm electing a flawed human being who's a politician, and my job is to mitigate the damage. My job is to find a candidate who's going to do the most to save the most lives. And we know in America, there's no other issue that kills more human beings every single day. Nothing kills more Americans every single day than abortion. So my job is to elect the people who will put an end to that violence.
Wow. And what are the options? You get somebody that maybe is a smoother talker and they say things, but then they'll go ahead and do everything contrary to what they say. I'd rather have a guy that's just out in the open with what he believes, but he delivers.
That's right. So
that's exactly right.
Abortion
and I think,
is the #1 cause of death in America?
I know it is in the world. I don't know about America.
It is, yeah. And I mean, nothing kills 2,700 Americans a day other than abortion.
And we're talking about the coronavirus, and people are pushing the panic button. We've had 2 people die, which we hate to see 2 people die, but it's nothing compared to the abortion, and people have become numb to that.
That's right.
That's absolutely right. And, you know, when you think about a lot of folks' rhetoric is surrounding the election of there's a lot of important issues we need to vote on. Absolutely, there's a lot of important issues we need to consider when we're voting. But it comes down to, honestly, one issue. If you saw the broken bodies of 2,700 Americans on the evening news every single night, every single week, every single month, when you went to vote at the ballot box in November, you would have one issue in your mind, and you'd say, I may not like this candidate. I may not want to have him over for dinner, but I'm going to vote for the candidate who's going to end this violence. But because abortion happens behind those closed doors, because that Stericycle truck comes and picks up all of the bodies of children to incinerate or dispose of them, because we don't see those bodies.
Or sell them to somebody else for research.
Or sell them. That's right. Because we don't see them, it allows us to say, well, abortion's important, but it's one of many other issues. But honestly, if you don't have that right to life, why are you talking about liberty? Why are you talking about the right to property? There's a fundamental ordering of rights, and life is foremost always.
And Kristin, you might speak towards this. I think it was just last week that the Senate couldn't even come up with 60 votes to save the life of a child after it had survived an abortion. They would go ahead and kill it. What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I think this shows you the extremism of the Democratic Party. I actually think it's a pretty sad reflection of where we are in our kind of culture at this moment. That, you know, there was this Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act that had been proposed. What it would do is force abortionists and medical workers at an abortion facility, if a child was born accidentally during an abortion, to call an ambulance, administer care. Usually that's oxygen, because the children, their lungs aren't fully developed until they're 36 weeks. So it's a very simple thing, and this is very basic stuff. But the abortion industry is categorically opposed to supporting the life of anybody who is born accidentally during abortion, which we know, even according to the CDC and Guttmacher Institute, does happen. We do believe there's a few hundred babies who are born accidentally during abortion every year. And I think it was a really hard vote. I mean, we failed to get 60 votes. And in the U.S. Senate, and the way the Senate works is you have to have 60 votes to invoke cloture, which means that the Senate will formally end debate and move to vote. And you have to have 60 votes to end that debate. And so they were unable to do it. And with the infanticide vote, every Republican voted. And then there were actually two Democratic senators who voted. So I think it was a 55 or 56 vote, but it failed short of the 60 votes to actually go to end debate to then actually do a majority vote. And I think that's pretty sad that, and I think it shows you how scared the abortion industry is, that they can't even allow the senators they support to vote for something very common sense, which like 99% of Americans would be in support of, because it runs counter to their narrative. Just think about from the abortion industry side for a second. If they were to acknowledge that babies could be born alive during abortions and they could continue to live if given basic medical care, that would really undermine their arguments for why these late-term abortions should be committed in the first place.
That'd take it out of being a fetus into a person.
That's right.
That's right. And that's what we hear all the time on campuses, Andrew. I was on a campus in California on Thursday, and I had this mob of students surround me, and I was answering as many questions as I could as fast as possible. I just kept hearing that word, fetus, 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 over and over again, like the fetus was this alien that wasn't one of us. And I had to say over and over again, you didn't come from a fetus. You once were a fetus, just like how you once were an embryo, a zygote, a toddler, an infant, an adolescent. These are just stages in the human being's development. But because that word fetus is used, it allows the abortion lobby to kind of say, they're not like us.
It's a way of dehumanizing them and making it so that it's not murder, but it is absolute murder. So you had mentioned before we came on the air that you've got, I think, a spring tour coming up. What are some of the things that you're doing to make a difference in this area?
Sure. Well, every semester, Students for Life tours college campuses with some sort of new messaging tour of how to engage young people about the issue of abortion. And we're always looking at polling and data to figure out what are the messages that can move them, that move that mushy middle, which is that I don't like abortion, but I wouldn't tell my friend not to have an abortion audience, which that's really the biggest subset we're dealing with. So our spring tour this year is called Heart to Heart. And it's based off some polling we've been tracking at Students for Life within the pro-life movement, that there was a Kaiser poll that came out the day of the March for Life, actually in January, that said that 49% of Americans oppose abortions after fetal cardiac activity can be detected. That's huge, because if you know when the heartbeat begins, that means 49% of Americans are against all abortions, because your heart began to beat after 21 days after conception, at 3 weeks. So every single abortion that's committed in America today is committed when the child already has a beating heart. The abortionist is only successful if the heart ceases to beat. And so that's kind of the connection we're making with students on campuses. We're trying to ask them to vote when they think the heart begins to beat. Then we're educating them about the actual scientific facts. And then we're asking them how they feel about these procedures that end beating hearts.
So you say this is a tour. Are you going to multiple locations? How many locations? What's happening?
Yeah, we'll be at 150 campuses before the end of semester. Over 30 states. So every one of our regional coordinators will get the tour for a period of 1 to 2 weeks. We'll go and train our Students for Life group and how to dialogue. And then we go on campus with them to host this display and table. In addition to this tour, I'm actually doing my spring speaking tour. So my speaking tour is called Make Abortion Illegal Again. So I'm talking about about Roe. I'm talking about our goal in the pro-life movement to make abortion illegal and unthinkable. So I'll be touring about 11 campuses, and I've already hit up a few. So we're crisscrossing the country as fast as possible before finals begin.
So on these tours, how many students do you average, or could you give us an idea of how many students this will impact that'll come to all of these different locations?
Well, I don't have all the numbers in front of me right now, but I can tell you per campus, we look between having about 65 and 150 conversations on every single campus that we stop at.
So this isn't like a conference where they all come and just sit and listen to you. You go out and talk to them on a one-to-one basis.
We go out to talk to them because no one has more conversations on a daily, weekly, or annual basis about abortion than Students for Life. This is what we do. We are on campuses every day talking to those most targeted by the abortion industry. And that's what the tour is supposed to do, is to get the students to take the earbuds out of their ears and have an actual discussion with us about abortion. We have little Post-it notes where we ask the students to stop and vote. That kind of gets their initial attention. We have a teddy bear that actually has the sound of the fetal heart at about 8 weeks. And you hear the heart beating very, very fast. So we have a couple of engagement tools to get students to stop and have conversations with us. Our goal this year at Students for Life in general is to have 250,000 conversations with young people,
Wow.
either in person or online, about abortion. And these are conversations that then we're also measuring to see where they line up from the beginning of the conversation to the end of the conversation. So like, for example, our fall tour, we were averaging about a 31% conversion rate of students that we spoke to on campuses. And this is something
great.
that I think it's a good way to start kind of measuring our impact, to know that, not only are folks who support Students for Life building up the future leaders of the pro-life movement, but we're also having conversations with those who are going to get the ad from Planned Parenthood tonight on their phone. They're going to get the email. They're going to see the Planned Parenthood flyer tomorrow on campus. We can reach them before they do.
In the practical government school here at Karis, we take our students down to one of the college campuses and do what I call pro-life evangelism, where you're engaging these people on the streets, and those conversations seem to always end up talking about God. And it's not just a way to change the way people think about abortion, it's a way to tell them about Jesus. Have you guys found that to be the case too?
It is. I try to start the conversations completely secular on the campuses. And always the objections. I think a lot of people are always concerned about talking about abortion because they're like, Kristin, I don't know as much as you do. It's really not that hard, because every single talk that I have about abortion always comes down to the same question. What is it, right? What is it? And we talk about rape. We'll talk about life of the mother. We'll talk about cases where a child has a fetal abnormality. But then then sometimes we'll talk about suffering. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to what is it? And then the next question is, why does it matter? Why does it have value? And that's the religious question, is it not?
Right.
Of why does, and this was an interesting, just thinking about my conversations this Thursday at Cal Poly out there in California. One man started, yelling at me for being a religious zealot. And I said, well, sir, I didn't bring up religion. You have brought up religion. And he said, well, you're doing this because you're a Christian. And I said, well, I am a Christian, and I do believe we all have value. And so, yes, that it does inform the devotion and the passion I have towards this, right? But it was interesting because I asked him, I said, well, from your kind of whatever label you've given yourself, agnostic or atheist, do humans have value over other living things? And he really couldn't answer the question. It kind of, when you ask them that question, Richard, I don't know if you all have seen this with your work on campuses there, but it's hard because if you espouse this atheist or agnostic principle, how do you answer that question? Because if they come back and say, and the one student kind of came back and said, well, all living things have equal value. And I said, well, that's an interesting perspective to take. So do you acknowledge you're a mass murderer every time you get in your car and drive, and you've probably killed, I don't know how many thousands of ants or bugs that run into your windshield? Like, how would we handle that? And so you start asking those questions like that, and they don't really have an answer to it, right? They instinctively know that we do treat human beings with more value than other living creatures.
So you mentioned that you plan on or normally reach around 250,000, and 31% you see converted over to pro-life. So that's over 70,000 people that you went over. That is quite a success rate.
We are, it's amazing to be able to do this work and this mission and kind of see the Holy Spirit work through us. It's not, trust me, Andrew, it is not because of me. It's because what's written on their hearts, they know fundamentally that abortion is wrong. And so our goal really on these campuses is to expose the illogical position of the abortion industry and to question them. Because a lot of times students will just try to regurgitate things that they've heard on TV or they might have heard their parents say. But then when you actually ask them, they don't have a good answer.
They haven't thought this through. It's just an emotional response. So I'm just trying to get some feedback from you. So you have 31% convert. I assume that those were people who were pro-abortion who come over. So what percentage do you have that are just completely antagonistic? What percentage are people who are pro-life already before you touched them?
Well, I would think if you would look at those who are completely antagonistic or extremists, you're looking at maybe 1 in 10 on a campus, about 10% that, and that's kind of falls in with the national narrative and polling. We've seen that about 9% of Americans are Barack Obama's or Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden's when it comes to abortion whenever, wherever, all 9 months and taxpayer funded.
But that's really a relatively small number.
It is.
And yet they have a disproportional voice because Christians have not been doing what you're doing and standing up and speaking out.
That's right. They have a disproportionate representation in the media. They'll be at the Supreme Court this week. They got all these Hollywood stars coming out in support of this Supreme Court hearing for the pro-abortion side. And it's just simply because they're the loudest. And we just have failed to speak up. The church has failed to speak up. I actually truly believe that the only reason we still have legal abortion in America is because our church has failed to stop it. More than half of all abortions are committed on self-described Christian women. And if the church would stand up and refuse to, if the pews refuse to do business with an abortion facility, if we refuse to let our children attend schools where Planned Parenthood's going to be coming in and teaching the sex ed, if we just put our foot down, if we said, you know what, we're going to go in front of every single abortion facility, expose what we're doing there. If the church said that, if the church was dedicated towards that, I don't think we would have abortion.
Well, here in Colorado Springs, we had 2 Planned Parenthoods, and our pregnancy centers that we helped start and I fund on a regular basis, they have closed one, and the other one will only do abortions half of 1 day a week, and not a single doctor in Colorado Springs will do it. They have to come from Boulder. So it can happen. We have literally seen the abortion rate in Colorado Springs cut way down to nearly nothing.
That's great.
And see, and that's a great story, Andrew, of that's exactly what happens when the local church gets involved and says, not in my town. Like, I'm going to stop this. And I think it's sometimes hard for people when we think about abortion as this global, this national issue. And a lot of folks kind of get like almost depressed of like, well, there's just nothing I can do. And the reality is you always can do something about abortion. Does your church have a pro-life outreach? According to our statistics and the polling we've done, only 6% of Protestant denominations and churches have a pro-life ministry inside of them. So does your pastor know how to minister to women who are hurting from a past abortion? Does your church speak openly to how to support a woman in crisis? Have you talked to the young people in your lives about abortion and what abortion really is? I know sometimes we feel like, we don't want to talk to our kids about sex, and we just feel icky about them. So I think I'm still waiting for my parents to talk to me about the birds and the bees, which might explain why I'm 4. Yeah, maybe if they would. No, but I mean, they just didn't want to talk about it. But you have to think about, if you don't talk about to your kid or your grandkid about this stuff, and I know it might make you feel uncomfortable, Planned Parenthood is waiting to talk to your kid.
Well, they've probably already talked to them. Like I heard a story about a kid that, a parent went in and says, well, I need to talk to you about sex. And this 8-year-old said, sure, what do you want to know? They already know.
Yeah.
So, Kristin, I know that you're having these engagements on campus and stuff like that, and that's really great. But does your website have practical things that people can do? I'm assuming that you need support to be able to do this. Are there other things that they could do to learn how they could get involved?
Absolutely. There's a couple of things that you can do. If you go to studentsforlife.org, if you can donate, sign up to be a monthly supporter, which will go towards the support to the regional coordinator in your state. And it's a lot of gas bills and food to take out students, especially pizza bills. You can also, if you go to studentsforlife.org, there's a map on the page where you have all of our regional coordinators. So if you know a young person who's involved in a church youth group, or a school, and you think they could start a pro-life group, or at least host one of our staff members to come into school or come into the church to speak about abortion, you can contact the regional coordinator of your state, or you can just simply email. If you email your state name, so Minnesota at studentsforlife.org, just write out your state name. That will go right to our coordinator in your state. You can also go to studentsforlifeaction.org. So we're partnering nationally for the 2020 election. I'm sure we'll probably get into that later, but we're going to need a lot of help. We're trying to get over 1,000 young people and pro-life supporters to knock on doors during the election. We're going to be trying to make 6 million personal text messages, send those out. So we need supporters. We need volunteers all across the country. So you can just go to studentsforlifeaction.org and sign up for our listserv on that. We'll be sending you lots of details.
I'm doing this from memory, but I think when you were on my TV program, didn't you say that your students going and knocking on doors, it was verifiable that they literally flipped the election in some places because of that?
That's right. Yeah, we did it in Virginia, the state legislature races this fall, and we knew it was going to be a Democratic kind of tidal wave, but our goal was to kind of mitigate the damages. And so we were really lucky and blessed to be able to go into some districts and just by knocking on a few thousand doors. And some of these races, especially when you look at state legislative races, some of these races are literally determined by a few hundred votes.
Wow.
Right.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, we need to give some time here for questions. Have we got any questions?
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions coming in. Let's see here. The first one is from a guest on chat, and they ask, how can we encourage our pastors to speak out and stand up against abortion?
Well, I would definitely encourage you as a member of the church to go schedule a meeting with your pastor and say, look, it's been this many months, this many years since you've spoken out about abortion. I'd like to help you with that. What is it that you need resources on? Here's a list of post-abortion healing resources in our community. Project Rachel's Vineyard. Here are resources for women in the community. Here's a crisis pregnancy center list of all the pregnancy centers, and you can find that list on optionline.org anytime. Here's the helpline number. Here is the Abortion Pill Reversal Recovery Network. And let me help you write the sermon. Let's make a plan. Maybe you speaking as the member can get up and speak, and then he just kind of fills in afterwards. And so you kind of take the pressure off of him.
Yeah, let me just kind of dovetail on that. But a minister, especially pastors, are so busy that for you to come and say, you do this, you're going to get a very negative response 9 out of 10 times. But if you say, this is something that God has laid on my heart. Would you facilitate this? Could I put something in a bulletin? And I'll do the work if you'll just give me the freedom to do it. I think most pastors would embrace that, or many would. So that'd be
Excellent.
appropriate.
Yeah, so here's another question, Kristin. This guest asks, those who believe in abortion used to say the fetus was a clump of cells and no one knows when life begins. Has that position been undermined by developments in science and medicine?
Well, it absolutely has been undermined, but do they still use it? Yes. We actually still hear that all the time. It's just a clump of cells. I actually have students on campuses seriously try to argue with me that it's not alive. I'm like, how could, dead things don't kick and grow in a coordinated fashion. Like, you have to admit, it's a living human being. A law of biogenesis says that, like begets like. I can't make a koala bear with my husband as much as I desperately want a koala bear for a pet. Like, I just can't do it. And so it's interesting, Richard, that you say that. Like, yes, science is undeniable that what is inside of her is a living member of our human species, but it's sadly a stupid argument we still hear today on campuses. I mean, if I had like a nickel for every time I had to say that, the child was alive and a member of species, I don't think I would ever have to ask for support ever again.
When I helped start the pregnancy center in Colorado Springs, we showed a film, Silent Scream, and it was based on sonogram, and it actually showed children during abortions recoiling and pulling away in pain, and you could literally see them screaming in the womb. And I think that there are some states that have pain-capable bills or something.
That's right. About 18 states that have banned abortions at the moment where we know a child can feel pain, which the science is moving so fast, the laws are going to be changed. So there's been about 18 states that have banned abortion when a child can feel pain at 20 weeks. But then a couple of years ago, a study came out and said it's about 18 and a half weeks. And then there was actually a study that came out now we're in March. So at the middle of January that said, and it was from a pro-abortion and a pro-life researcher. So they worked together on it. And they actually said that they believe the fetus can feel pain as early as 12 weeks.
Wow. Anyway, all of those things speak to the fact that it is not just a hunk of cells.
Absolutely.
If it can feel pain and has a heartbeat and all of these things, it's a person.
It's sad, Richard, because honestly, when you look at it, and some people are like, how don't you get frustrated? And I think the reality is so many are willing to deny science. They're willing to deny biology in order to do what they want with their bodies.
It really comes down to the fact that a child is inconvenient for them financially, emotionally. They don't want the time, the commitment, and it's all selfish, and they will couch it in that it's only tissues and stuff, but it's just demonic. It's selfish.
Well, yeah, and that's another question we've got here is, well, what do you say to people who say, my body, my choice? Isn't that the same idea? Well, it's really a moral question. Does a woman's convenience trump a child's right to live?
That's right? So one, I always clarify, you don't really mean it's your body, right? Because you have to acknowledge it's another human body. When I was pregnant with my sons, I did not become a male, right? Just because I had male genitalia living in my womb, that I was not a male. So, so I always clarify that it's really not her body. We're talking about a second body. Now, what you're getting at is this other body is inside of your body, and you feel like you have the right to do whatever you want. And I think all of us recognize basic limitations with this right to liberty over the right to life, which is a fundamental. This is what Roe did, right? It disordered the rights. It's the same thing what they did in Dred Scott. They said property was more important than liberty. And that's anytime you have this fundamental disordering, this is when stuff gets flipped. So I always try to clarify that we don't, I always ask questions like, so if a woman goes into the pulmonary ward in the hospital, two of my children have cystic fibrosis, and starts smoking a cigarette, does she have the right to smoke the cigarette? Because it's her body, her choice. And everyone will say, well, no, absolutely not. Well, okay, really? I agree with you. Why doesn't she have the right to smoke that cigarette? Because her smoking the cigarette hurts somebody else.
Very good
Exactly.
point.
That's exactly. And this is you always get, and you can ask a bunch of different questions. You can ask, does a woman have the right to smoke? And do you think it's okay if a woman smokes and drinks and does crack cocaine while she's pregnant with her child? Has she done anything wrong?
If you were a pure abortionist, you'd have to say, yeah, it's okay because
exactly. And you make them bite the bullet, Andrew, and they don't like to do that. Right. And so I try to point that out. It's like, first of all, no one is actually really that extreme for bodily autonomy. And then when you start asking those questions of why isn't it okay to smoke up at the pulmonary ward of the hospital, they say, well, that's different. Oh, why is it different? Because your children are alive. Oh, so what you're saying is that the unborn isn't alive. And so you always go back to that fundamental question of what is it?
It's an indefensible position.
It is.
It really is.
I believe that the abortionists have lost their cover. They use these terms that it's my body, etc. But now they've even passed these laws that once a child is born and is alive outside of the womb, there's no way you can claim that's part of your body then. It's existing outside of you. And they still want to have the ability to let that child just die.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing we always say that, Richard, and I think the most controversial thing I've been saying on campuses during my speeches lately has been, yeah, you have the right to do what you want with your body, but you have to understand that when you make decisions and take actions, every decision you take, every action you take has consequences. And if you choose to engage in sexual behavior with a member of the opposite sex, then you're consenting to the very fact that you may create a living, whole, unique human being. And if you're not ready to create another human being with that other person you're having sex with, then it's very easy. Just don't have sex with them.
That's a great argument, but I was at the state capitol when they argued against this bill for sex indoctrination, and there was a young high school girl that actually spoke, and she was approaching that subject and said, some people tell us just not to have sex. She says, that is not going to happen. We are going to have sex. And they just presented it as that is completely irresponsible to tell a person to take responsibility and not have sex if you don't want to have a child.
Yeah, that's an interesting, they're making an argument that a person has the fundamental right to sex.
And that's
that
not true.
Your right to sex outweighs someone's right to life, which you can get to that really easily. Like one thing I was talking to a student about before, I said, well, think about maybe a dad. He's a single dad. He has a 2-year-old son, and he hasn't had sex with a woman in 6 months, and he is desperate for sex. So he can't find a babysitter. There's no babysitter around. He doesn't know what to do. So he just leaves his son at home and goes out and starts partying with women so he can start having as much sex as he wants. If he comes home and his son's dead, he finds out his son has choked himself or has electrocuted himself. Has he done anything wrong? His fundamental right to sex, to get as much sex and as pleasure as he wants, outweigh the safety of his son.
That's great,
those
Kristin.
are great points that you're making, and it just shows how messed up our whole society is.
Right.
It is.
We're talking about abortion, which that's true, but it is the result of so many wrong values and exalting of self and stuff. It's just ungodly.
It really is, Andrew.
Here's another good question, Kristin. This is from Joe on chat. He asks, how do I deal with some of the people running for office who are Republican, but they don't think the issue of life applies to them, such as school board or magistrate judge or city council? Do you have an answer for that?
Well, I mean, I would say I would ask every single one of those candidates, if you get a chance going to a forum, or if they go to your church, or if you see them out at the grocery store, ask them where they stand on abortion. And then if they say it doesn't matter, say, well, obviously you haven't been paying attention. And you can give every single one of those people examples of why we need to know how school board members feel about abortion, because this is where all of the Planned Parenthood sex ed curriculum comes through, right? It's through school boards. We often have situations where schools refuse to allow a Students for Life group on campus or an event. That ends up at the school board level. If you're talking about a county commissioner or a zoning commissioner, where do you think the Planned Parenthood or the abortion facility goes to get the permit to open up the new facility in your neighborhood? They're going to go to the county and the local officials. So I think it definitely does matter. And it may not be something that comes up the first year of them serving, but it can always come up. And then honestly, just fundamentally, I think if you're wrong on abortion, I don't think I can trust you on any level to be my elected official.
Yeah, that's right. Where you stand on life is one of the things that'll tell you where that person's going to end up on just about every other issue.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, I know that in the U.S. Congress and the Senate, I've heard David Barton say that I think there might be only one Democrat who might be pro-life. I'm not sure on that statistic.
In this U.S. Senate, there were 2 that voted. So one of my senators here in Pennsylvania, Bob Casey, one of my former senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, they're Democrats. They voted with the pro-lifers for the Pain Capable bill and the Born Alive Abortion Survivor Act. They don't always vote pro-life when it comes to issues like health care, other things like that, but they do a fairly decent job of voting pro-life. They don't vote pro-life on judges. In the U.S. House, I know of 2 staunch pro-life members who are Democrats. Our Students for Life Action Team is going to be door knocking for one of those Democrats in the primary next weekend.
It's hard. Finding a Democrat that's pro-life is like trying to find hen's teeth.
Yeah, and you know what? That's so sad, Andrew, too, because when we think about creating this society where abortion is illegal and unthinkable, we as pro-lifers really ought to want to have we want to have Democrats and Republicans fighting for our votes. When we have both Republicans and Democrats fighting for our votes as pro-lifers, then we'll know we'll win, right? Because then they're going to be, competing with each other to say who's the most anti-abortion party.
Well, my point that I was trying to get at is that I don't think you can find very many Democrats that are pro-life. But what would happen if you had 2 Republicans running for city council and one was pro-life and the other one wasn't? But the one who wasn't pro-life had all of the other things that you liked. How would you deal with that? Would you let the pro-life issue trump everything else?
I always do. I'm a pro-life first voter in all things. If you aren't right on the issue of abortion, I cannot trust you on any other issue.
That's quite a statement.
That's quite a statement. That's powerful. It reflects there's something wrong with your thinking. If you're not willing to protect the most vulnerable and the innocent among us, then what are you going to do with all the other rights, the right to property and freedom and everything else?
And sometimes these candidates, I actually think they probably are pro-life, their parents, their grandparents, but they're kind of afraid of the abortion lobby. Even when you look at this U.S. Senate vote where you had candidates saying that they are in favor of letting a baby who survives abortion die. I really have a hard time believing all of the Democrats in the U.S. Senate believe that, but they're afraid. They're afraid of what Planned Parenthood would do to them. Yeah. They're afraid of what the Democratic National Committee might do. They might run an opponent against them in the primary. And that to me is also another issue, right? So not only maybe they might personally be with us on the issue, but they're cowardly, right? They're afraid to speak out. And that itself shows you another major character flaw.
I don't believe any person who's been born has the right to keep another person from being born.
Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely.
We got another question here.
Yes, we do. So we just posted on our website a link to Heartbeat International so people could see the worldwide directory of pro-life centers and other pregnancy resources. And I think Students for Life is on that website. But the question here is if a woman is pregnant and scared or doesn't want the baby or the pregnancy, what resources can we refer her to, or what could someone tell that person?
Yeah, I mean, I always say you can go to optionline.org. That has the national listing of every pregnancy resource center across the country, every maternity home, and every adoption agency. You can also go to findahealthcenter.hrsa.gov. That's the listing of the 8,000 federally qualified health centers that provide every support service that Planned Parenthood provides, medical service, plus way more, minus abortions. And those are taxpayer-funded entities that have to treat you no matter your ability to pay. And so you've got 2 really great resources there, where at the option line, these are going to be all private charities. You have the findahealthcenter.hrsa.gov, which are the federally qualified health centers. So you have all of those resources. I would also say if you know somebody in your life who's going through a crisis pregnancy, oftentimes and what we see on campuses when we do our Pregnant on Campus program of trying to change the campus environment, we often find it's really not the tangible resources that always make a difference. A lot of times it's just having that one person who is willing to stand up and say, I'll be with you, I'll support you. And I know especially when we're talking with the church, there is a lot of pressure for Christian women because they feel like they're going to be scorned if they go back to church pregnant, if they come home from, college break and they enter in the church with a big pregnant belly, that they're going to be judged. And I think that's something that we need to take on as Christians and have a language where we're setting our expectations for behavior and making that very clear that we expect you not to engage in this behavior because there's real life consequences to having sex before marriage. But if you mess up, and we know we all mess up, if you mess up, we will love you and support you through this. And I think that speaks volumes.
Kristin, we have about 3 minutes left, and so it has to be a quick answer. But I remember from my TV program that you and Melissa Oden were sharing that Planned Parenthood presents it, that if they were to close us down or defund us, women would lose all of these services. And there is so few Planned Parenthoods compared to all of these other groups that you're talking about. Could you put that into perspective and dispel that?
Yeah, there's fewer than 600 Planned Parenthoods across the country. They serve a little over 2 million patients every year. If every single Planned Parenthood in America would shut down tomorrow, Amen. Every federally qualified health center, which there's about 8,000 of them, every federally qualified health center would only have to see 2 more patients a week to make up the difference.
And what do these centers provide? Or what would be lost? Would women lose any services other than abortion?
Actually, these federally qualified health centers do far more services than Planned Parenthood. They provide every single service that Planned Parenthood provides, plus a lot more, like well women care, pregnancy care. They actually do STD treatment. A lot of people don't know this, but Planned Parenthood treats less than 20% of STDs that they detect. They're not even treating STDs anymore. They simply
just use that to draw people in that are afraid that they've got an STD.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so, man, that's awesome right there.
Yes, that is. Boy, what a lot of amazing information tonight.
Well, Kristin, I want to thank you for being involved in this battle back when it wasn't so positive and we couldn't see an end in sight, and yet you were sitting there and doing this, and praise God, it's paying off. Again, could you give how they could contact you and support you, what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah, go to studentsforlife.org. You can make a donation at studentsforlife.org or sign up for our email list or get connected with one of our regional coordinators to help the young person in your life get plugged in. You could also go to studentsforlifeaction.org if you're interested in our work that we'll be doing in the 2020 elections, whether donating or maybe helping us go door to door and make phone calls. You can sign up at studentsforlifeaction.org.
So there's a place that they could actually volunteer with one of your local units.
That is right. We will have volunteer opportunities for everyone, no matter their age.
Amen. Well, that's awesome. I tell you, I think this has been great. Thank you for everything that you're doing, and thank you for watching. Remember that we do this every Monday night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and we have on different guests. We've had people, very, very well-known people, and people that are making a difference like Kristin. And we just are so glad that you're a part of it. Remember that you can contribute and now become a member of Truth and Liberty organization, and we would really encourage you to do that.
Amen.
That'd be awesome.
Yep.
So thank you for being with us. And again, we want to thank CTN for carrying this on some of your stations and doing that for us. We're reaching lots of people. Thank you for being a part. Make sure that you join us again next week for our Truth and Liberty Monday night live cast. God bless you. See you next week.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net. Truth and Liberty is viewer supported. If you'd like to help us continue our live casts, you can make a donation at truthandliberty.net.